The hum of the highway beneath my tires was a low, constant drone, a stark contrast to the tumultuous storm brewing within me. My name is Natalie Williams, and at 28 years old, I was navigating a landscape both achingly familiar and profoundly alien. 5 years. 5 long years I had intentionally kept my distance from this place, from the very air I was now breathing. And yet, here I was, returning. My palms slick with nervous sweat against the steering wheel. A secret weighted with years of determination, hidden in the garment bag tucked carefully in the back seat, the colonial insignia I had earned. My family, particularly my parents, had always been dismissive of my military career. It was, in their words, nothing. A temporary detour, a youthful rebellion, a path chosen by those lacking the ambition for what they considered real success. Little did they know that tomorrow, at my father's esteemed company event, their carefully constructed perceptions would shatter, and everything would irrevocably change. I pulled into the familiar driveway, the gravel crunching under the tires with an almost accusatory sound. Taking a deep, fortifying breath, I stepped out of the car. Before I continue this story, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments below, and hit that like and subscribe button. Trust me, if you have ever been underestimated by family, if you have ever felt like an invisible outlier in your own home, this story will show you exactly how incredibly sweet, how profoundly satisfying vindication can taste. The moment I stepped through the front door of my childhood home, a strange wave of déjà vu washed over me, almost sickening in its intensity. Nothing, absolutely nothing, had changed. It was a perfectly preserved time capsule of my small town Montana upbringing, right down to the outdated floral curtains my mother, Diana, had always stubbornly refused to replace. The same faded family photos, carefully arranged in chronological order, lined the hallway, each one a silent testament to a past I no longer recognized as my own. The same worn, slightly uncomfortable furniture occupied the living room, whispering tales of countless quiet judgments and unsaid expectations that had always hung heavy in the air. The very essence of the house seemed to cling to a fixed, unyielding narrative about who I was supposed to be. "Natalie, you made it?" My mother's voice called from the kitchen, a distant, almost perfunctory acknowledgement. She didn't bother to come and greet me, a pattern as old as my memory. Her tone carried that same subtle, almost imperceptible disappointment it always had, a muted sigh in her voice reserved specifically for me, especially when contrasted with the effusive pride she reserved for my older brother, Gregory. I set my bag down in the entryway, the heavy thud resonating in the quiet house, and wandered through the familiar rooms, my fingers trailing along the polished surfaces of tables and the textured wallpaper, a ghost in my own past. My father, Albert, had poured over 30 years of his life into pinnacle defense systems. He had meticulously climbed the corporate ladder, from a diligent engineer to a senior executive, a testament to his unwavering dedication and his masterful networking skills. Our entire family universe had always revolved around his career success, the immense shadow it cast for my brother to follow, a preordained path laid out for Gregory from birth. "Your brother will be here soon," my mother informed me as I finally entered the kitchen, the aroma of a roasting chicken filling the air. She stirred a pot on the stove, her back to me. "He just got promoted again, you know. Senior project manager now." The pride in her voice was not merely unmistakable. It was palpable, a vibrant, almost tangible force in the room. It was the kind of fierce, unwavering pride she had never, not once, used when discussing my career. "That is great," I replied, the words feeling mechanical, almost automated. After years of practice in managing my tone, in tempering my own accomplishments so as not to overshadow, or worse, annoy them. "I'll have to congratulate him." My mother continued preparing dinner, her chatter a relentless monologue about Gregory and his wife, Megan. She recounted every minute detail of their new sprawling house in the suburbs, every corporate accomplishment that had cemented their status as the undisputed golden children of our family. Not once, not even for a fleeting moment, did she pause to ask about my life, my work, or the myriad experiences that had shaped me over the past 5 years. I excused myself and headed upstairs, seeking refuge in the sanctuary of my old bedroom. Like every other corner of this house, it remained impeccably frozen in time. High school cheerleading trophies, still gleaming with a youthful optimism that felt alien to me now, adorned the shelves. Academic awards and college acceptance letters, meticulously preserved, decorated the walls, celebrating a potential they had once believed in. My parents had carefully preserved everything from the era before I made what they considered my disappointing choice: to join ROTC instead of pursuing a conventional business degree. The path they had envisioned for me, what they did not display, conspicuously absent from every surface, were any acknowledgments, any trophies, any photographs, any proof whatsoever of my military career. There were no photos of my commissioning ceremony, the proud moment I officially became an officer. There were no shadow boxes showcasing the various ranks I had achieved, each one earned through grit and sacrifice. There were no newspaper clippings, however small, detailing my deployments or promotions. In their minds, I had wasted my immense potential the very moment I chose service over corporate success, a perceived dereliction of duty to their grand plan. I sat on my childhood bed, running my hand over the familiar, slightly faded quilt. The soft fabric a tactile memory of a different, simpler time. My mind drifted back to the night I had first told them about my ROTC scholarship. The moment their carefully constructed future, for me, began to unravel. My father had stared at me with such profound, unmitigated disappointment that I had almost changed my mind right then and there. The military is for people without options, Natalie, he had declared, his voice heavy with a condescension that still stung. You are smarter than that? You have more potential. Even then, their meticulous grooming of Gregory to follow precisely in my father's footsteps at Pinnacle was already well underway, a silent, almost ritualistic preparation. My brother had eagerly embraced the plan, thriving on the blatant favoritism, using every single opportunity, subtle or overt, to remind me how much more successful he would inevitably be, how much better equipped he was for the real world. I opened my suitcase and, with deliberate slowness, carefully removed the garment bag containing my dress uniform. Tomorrow, Pinnacle Defense Systems would be hosting their annual leadership conference, a high-stakes event. My father had casually mentioned that the CEO herself, Shannon Murphy, would be visiting their branch, a rare and significant occasion. What my family did not know, could not even begin to fathom, was the true extent of my involvement. I was now the primary military liaison for the colossal $1.2 billion defense contract between the Army and Pinnacle, a position I had earned through years of dedicated service, a relentless pursuit of knowledge, and an expertise that was meticulously honed. My finger traced over the gleaming silver eagle insignia pinned to the collar, the symbol of my colonel rank. At 28 years old, I was one of the youngest colonels in the modern Army, a remarkable achievement. I specialized in cybersecurity defense systems, the very technology Pinnacle was contracted to develop for the military. This rank, this eagle, had been achieved faster than almost anyone in my division's history, a testament to my aptitude and relentless dedication. I carefully hung up my uniform in the closet, making sure it was completely hidden behind some old, forgotten clothes from my teenage years. For tonight, I would endure one more family dinner filled with their casual dismissal and their thinly veiled condescension. Tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow, the script would flip. The distinct chime of the doorbell reverberated through the house, announcing Gregory's arrival. I took a deep, steadying breath, squaring my shoulders. drawing on years of ingrained military training. It felt as if I were heading into battle, and in a way I was. I descended the stairs to face my family. The dining room felt inexplicably smaller than I remembered, almost claustrophobic, constricted by the oversized personalities gathered around the table. My brother, Gregory, had arrived with his wife, Megan. Both were meticulously dressed in expensive business, casual attire that screamed corporate success, a sartorial declaration of their ascension in the professional world. My cousin, Tiffany, had also been invited, which was no surprise. She worked as a finance director at a prestigious downtown bank and was often held up as yet another gleaming example of what I should have aspired to be, another benchmark against which my life choices were silently, constantly measured. "Natalie, you remember Tiffany?" my mother said, her voice laced with a performative casualness, as if Tiffany and I hadn't grown up together, practically inseparable for years. She just closed a multi-million-dollar deal for her bank. "Hi, Tiffany," I said, offering her a genuine smile, a warmth that was conspicuously absent in my interactions with my immediate family. Unlike them, Tiffany had always been kind to me, even if she didn't fully grasp or endorse my choices. "It's good to see you, Nat," she replied, giving me a quick, heartfelt hug. "Been way too long." The initial conversation remained pleasantly superficial, as we served ourselves from the various dishes my mother had prepared. My father, Albert, sat at the head of the table, a position of patriarchal authority. He occasionally checked his phone, surreptitiously glancing at work emails, despite my mother's disapproving, pointed glances. "So, Dad," Gregory began predictably, almost ritualistically, steering the conversation toward himself, to his latest achievement. "I wanted to tell you about the new project I'm heading up. Shannon personally selected me to lead the team." My father beamed with unrestrained pride, his chest puffing out. "That's my boy. Shannon Murphy doesn't hand out responsibilities lightly. You must have really impressed her." "Well," Gregory continued, shooting me a quick, almost imperceptible glance, making sure I was paying attention, making sure I was listening to his triumph. "It's the same project you've been working on for years, Dad. Shannon says my fresh perspective might help move things along faster." I bit my tongue, the metallic taste of restraint sharp in my mouth. I knew, with absolute certainty, that the project he was so proudly detailing was in fact the monumental Army contract I was now overseeing. The irony was almost too potent to bear. If only they knew how much authority, how much power I actually had over the success or even the utter failure of Gregory's brand, new, highly touted position. My mother, Diana, immediately jumped in, her voice brimming with eagerness, desperate to showcase Gregory's latest achievement. "Tell them about the staff you're managing now, dear." Gregory puffed up, basking in the spotlight. 12 direct reports, including 2 senior engineers who have been with the company for over 20 years. They weren't too happy about reporting to someone younger, but they got over it when they saw my results. "That is wonderful." My mother cooed, a sound reserved solely for Gregory. Then, as if an afterthought, she turned to me with a thin, almost brittle smile. "Natalie, how is your job going? Are you still at the same rank?" The dismissive way she uttered "job" rather than "career" was not lost on me. It was a subtle, yet deeply ingrained insult. "Things are going well," I replied simply, unwilling to reveal my promotion, to spoil tomorrow's grand unveiling. "Still a captain or whatever?" my father asked vaguely, his tone indicating not only his complete disinterest, but also his absolute ignorance of the correct progression of military ranks. "Something like that," I answered, quickly taking a large bite of mashed potatoes, a convenient excuse to avoid elaborating, to avoid the inevitable follow-up questions that would never come anyway. "You know?" my mother interjected, seamlessly changing the subject back to an acceptable topic. "Tiffany just bought a beautiful new condo downtown. 3 bedrooms with a gorgeous view of the mountains. Tiffany looked distinctly uncomfortable at being used as a comparison point again, a sacrificial lamb on the altar of my parents' disappointment in me. "It's really not that impressive," she said graciously, trying to deflect the praise. "Just good timing in the market. Still." My mother continued, ignoring Tiffany's modesty, her gaze lingering pointedly on me. "It's nice to see young people establishing themselves properly, building equity instead of moving around every few years." The thinly veiled dig at my military lifestyle was clear, unmistakable. In the last 8 years, I had lived in 4 different states and 2 foreign countries. A peripatetic existence my mother considered unsettled, immature, and fundamentally unstable. "Speaking of tomorrow," my father said, thankfully changing the subject, his tone shifting to one of grave importance. "The CEO is coming to review our branch. It's a big deal. Shannon Murphy doesn't visit regional offices often. I have my presentation already prepared," Gregory boasted, interrupting. "Shannon already emailed me personally to say she's looking forward to my innovation proposal." "Is there anything special planned for the visit?" I asked innocently, feigning casual curiosity, though my heart was beginning to thump with anticipation. My father nodded. "Full staff meeting, project reviews, and a special announcement about the military contract. Some colonel is supposed to come as the Pentagon liaison, but I doubt they'll send someone that high-ranking. Probably just some major who will be impressed by our operation." He chuckled, a dismissive sound. I suppressed a smile, allowing only a small, almost imperceptible twitch at the corner of my lips. "That sounds interesting." "Not really," Gregory scoffed, waving a dismissive hand. "Military types never understand the business side of things. They just follow orders and check boxes. It's all very rigid, very slow." "Gregory," Tiffany said with a frown, a rare protest from her. "That's not fair." But my brother was on a roll now, emboldened by my parents' tacit approval. "Come on, we all know the truth. The military is a fallback career. People who can't cut it in the real, competitive world hide behind ranks and regulations, behind a uniform." My mother nodded in agreement, her gaze sweeping over me with a familiar, pitying look. "We always knew you were so bright, Natalie. That's why it was such a disappointment when you chose that path. Such a waste of potential." "What exactly do you think I do in the Army?" I asked, keeping my voice level, carefully controlled, a skill honed over years of high-stakes negotiations in life. "Death decision-making. Push papers. Follow protocols." My father shrugged, genuinely perplexed. "Important work, sure, but not exactly challenging for someone with your potential. Someone who could have been a CEO. You'll never be anything there." Gregory laughed, a sharp, cutting sound that sliced through the dining room. 10 years from now, you'll still be taking orders while I'm running my own division. You'll be stuck." The word stung, despite my numerous accomplishments, despite the tangible evidence of my success. Years of therapy had helped me recognize that my family's approval should no longer dictate my self-worth, that their opinions were reflections of their own limitations, not mine. But old wounds ran deep, and their barbs still found their mark. "I think Natalie made a choice that works for her." Tiffany attempted to defend me, her voice gentle but firm. "A waste is what it is." My mother sighed dramatically, her pronouncement echoing through the room. "All that potential. Remember how all your teachers said you could run a company someday?" I pushed food around my plate, the perfectly cooked chicken suddenly tasteless, as they continued dissecting my supposed failures and missed opportunities. A ritual as old as our family dinners. The conversation moved on, seamlessly transitioning to Gregory's upcoming lavish vacation to Hawaii, Megan's recent promotion at her prestigious law firm, and Tiffany's impressive investment portfolio. Not once, throughout the entire evening, did anyone ask about my recent deployment to a war-torn region, or the specialized, top, secret training I had completed, skills that had saved lives and protected national security. As dessert was served a rich, chocolatey concoction that felt cloying on my tongue. My father mentioned again how utterly important tomorrow's meeting was for his career. 28 years I've put into Pinnacle, he declared, his voice filled with a mixture of hope and exhaustion. This contract could be what finally gets me to vice president. It's everything. I nodded sympathetically, a small, knowing smile playing on my lips. He had no idea just how much tomorrow would change everything, though certainly not in the way he expected. Later that night, I retreated to my childhood bedroom, the familiar sounds of the house settling, for the night a soft lullaby of memories. From down the hall, I could still hear my parents' voices, low and conspiratorial, still praising Gregory's achievements. "He really is exceptional," my mother was saying, her voice thick with admiration. "Shannon would be foolish not to see his potential for senior leadership." I closed my eyes, my fingers tracing the cool, smooth metal of the colonel insignia I had slipped from my bag, its weight a comforting presence in my palm. Tomorrow could not come soon enough. Sleep evaded me. I lay awake, staring at the glow in the dark stars still stuck to my ceiling, relics from a childhood when my potential had been measured differently, before the insidious comparisons began. Back then, before Gregory started working at Pinnacle, before my decision to join ROTC, my parents had seen something in me: intelligence, drive, a spark that was uniquely mine. But that changed the moment I chose a different path, a path divergent from the one they had meticulously planned. I remembered sitting at this very same dining table during my sophomore year of college, and ROTC brochure clutched nervously in my hand, explaining how the program would pay for my entire education and provide a career path I found profoundly meaningful. A chance to serve a purpose larger than myself, the military, my father had asked, his face contorting as if I had suggested becoming a street performer. "That's for people who can't get real jobs, Natalie. People who fail. Adi is a real job," I had countered, my voice firm despite the tremor in my hands, "and it's what I want." My mother had exchanged worried glances with my father, a silent agreement passing between them. "But what about law school or business? You always said you wanted to work at Pinnacle someday." No, they had always said that. I had merely nodded along, a compliant daughter, trying desperately to be the person they wanted me to be. When I stood my ground, the subtle undermining began. My achievements in ROTC, though significant, went utterly unacknowledged. My commissioning as a second lieutenant, a pivotal moment in my life, was attended only by Tiffany, who drove 6 hours to be there when my parents suddenly had unavoidable work commitments. My father had Gregory's promotion to junior analyst at Pinnacle prominently framed on his office wall, while my military portrait, in full uniform, remained in a dusty drawer hidden from view. Yet, despite their persistent dismissal, my career flourished. My innate aptitude for systems analysis and cybersecurity had been recognized early, my strategic mind a natural fit for the complex challenges of the digital battlefield. By 23, I had been rapidly promoted to captain and assigned to a specialized unit developing cutting-edge defensive protocols against emerging cyber threats. By 26, I had reached the rank of major after leading a high-stakes task force that identified and neutralized a sophisticated, nation-state sponsored attack on critical military infrastructure, saving countless classified documents and, potentially, countless lives. Captain Eleanor Grant had been my first true mentor, a woman who saw potential in me that my family stubbornly refused to acknowledge. "Williams," she had said after a particularly grueling training exercise, her gaze sharp and intelligent. "You think differently than the others. That's going to take you places. Far places." Under her astute guidance, I learned to trust my instincts, to lean into my unique perspective. to leverage my unconventional way of thinking as a strength rather than a perceived flaw. When a routine security audit revealed obscure patterns others had missed, Eleanor encouraged me to pursue it further, to dig deeper. The subsequent investigation ultimately uncovered a meticulously coordinated attempt to breach multiple defense systems simultaneously. The operation I subsequently led, a complex, high-pressure endeavor, earned me an early promotion to lieutenant colonel and, more importantly, put me squarely on the Pentagon's radar. Eleanor, by then a brigadier general, had personally recommended me for the pinnacle liaison position. They're developing next-generation security protocols, Williams, she had explained, her voice firm and confident. We need someone who understands both the technical and strategic implications, someone who can speak the language of both the military and corporate worlds, someone who knows what's at stake. When she pinned the gleaming silver eagle of a full colonel to my uniform just 3 weeks ago, the ceremony was attended by an impressive assembly of generals and Pentagon officials. My family, of course, was not there. I hadn't even told them about the promotion or any of the others. Years of their quiet dismissal had taught me a valuable, albeit painful, lesson to stop seeking their approval, to stop chasing a recognition that would never truly be given on my terms. Colonel Williams, General Eleanor had said afterward, her hand resting warmly on my shoulder. I hope you realize what an extraordinary achievement this is. Youngest colonel in the Cyber Command's history. I did realize it. I felt the weight of it, the responsibility, the quiet pride. But tomorrow would be the first time my family would truly begin to understand what I had accomplished. What kind of person I had become, what I represented. The Pinnacle contract was massive, almost unfathomable in its scope and significance. A $1.2 billion dedicated to developing advanced cybersecurity systems for critical military applications. As the primary liaison, I held final approval on all major decisions, every technical specification, and every intricate budget allocation. In the most literal sense, I would be overseeing my father's and my brother's work, their daily tasks, their entire project. The irony was almost too perfect. A poetic justice years in the making. For years, they had relentlessly belittled my career choice, trivializing my service, and now, I held significant influence over the very project that could determine their professional futures. I got out of bed and removed my uniform from the garment bag once more. The midnight blue fabric was immaculate, the brass buttons gleaming, even in the dim light of my childhood bedroom. I ran my fingers over the rows of ribbons and medals, each representing arduous missions, hard-won achievements, and profound sacrifices my family knew absolutely nothing about. The silver eagle insignia caught the faint light as I turned the uniform jacket in my hands. I remembered my father once saying, with a dismissive wave of his hand, "Ranks don't mean anything in the real world, Natalie. Out here, it's about what you can do, not what title they give you." He would learn tomorrow that in my world, in my reality, this rank was not given, it was earned. Earned through repeatedly proving exactly what I could do, under immense pressure, against overwhelming odds, and with lives on the line. I meticulously inspected every detail of my uniform, checking for the slightest loose thread, the smallest spot that needed attention. This ritual calmed me, the familiar routine grounding me against the emotional turbulence of being back home. By the time dawn broke, painting the sky with soft hues of orange and pink, I had moved past the raw emotions of yesterday's dinner. The uniform hung ready, perfectly pressed. My hair was precisely pinned according to military regulation, a disciplined contrast to my wild thoughts, and my resolve was firm, unyielding. Today, Colonel Natalie Williams would report for duty, not the disappointing daughter they thought they knew. I dressed with practiced efficiency, each button and pin placed with an almost surgical precision. The person in the mirror reflected confidence, authority, and an unwavering sense of purpose. No trace remained of the insecure girl who had once desperately sought her parents' approval, who had bent herself into impossible shapes to fit their expectations. As I meticulously pinned the Cunnill insignia to my collar, its cold metal a grounding weight, I reminded myself that this moment was not, fundamentally, about revenge. It was about finally allowing my family to see me, as I truly was, for better or worse, to acknowledge the culmination of years of quiet, relentless dedication. If they could not accept my success on my terms, if they refused to open their minds, that would be their loss, not mine. I checked my watch, a sturdy, elegant piece, a gift from General Eleanor. It was time. The company event would begin in an hour, and I needed to arrive early to coordinate with the security team, a necessary step for any high-level liaison. Downstairs, I heard the familiar sounds of my parents and Gregory preparing to leave separately, their muted voices drifting up the stairs. They had no idea I would be joining them, much less in what capacity. I waited until I heard the distinct sound of their cars, pulling away before heading downstairs and out to my own vehicle. The drive to Pinnacle Defense Systems took less than 15 minutes, a short journey that felt loaded with monumental significance. I used the time to center myself, reviewing key points about the contract I would be discussing today, ensuring I was fully prepared for the complex negotiations ahead. This wasn't just about showing my family who I had become. It was about ensuring a critical national security project received the meticulous oversight it required, that every detail was perfect. As I pulled into the reserved parking spot, clearly marked, Military Liaison, I straightened my uniform one last time, a final adjustment before stepping into the arena. The weight of responsibility settled comfortably on my shoulders, far more natural and comforting than the suffocating weight of my family's expectations had ever been. It was time to step into the role I had earned, regardless of who might be watching. The Pinnacle Defense Systems headquarters loomed before me, a gleaming monument of glass and steel, a powerful symbol of corporate success and military-industrial partnership. Its sleek, modern facade housed some of the most advanced technology development in the country, including the sophisticated cybersecurity systems I was now directly responsible for overseeing. Security at the entrance was, as expected, exceptionally tight, a necessary precaution for a facility managing multiple classified projects. I approached the guard station, where two security officers, both burly and alert, straightened immediately upon noticing my uniform and the unmistakable silver eagle pinned to my shoulder. "Good morning, Colonel," the first guard said, instantly recognizing the insignia and my rank, a respect already evident in his voice. "May I see your identification, please?" I presented my military ID and the project authorization pass. Colonel Natalie Williams, Pentagon Liaison for Project Aegis. The guard's eyes widened slightly as he processed my clearance, a flicker of surprise crossing his face. "Yes, Mom," he replied, his tone now deferential. "You are expected in the main conference room. Would you like an escort?" "That won't be necessary," I replied smoothly. "I know the way." In truth, I had meticulously studied the building, layout extensively before arriving, preparing for every contingency. As I walked through the security checkpoint, I could feel the atmosphere shift. A subtle but distinct ripple. Military officers of my rank rarely visited regional offices, and certainly not ones as young as me. Employees stopped mid-conversation as I passed, their hushed whispers following me. Some nodded respectfully, a clear sign of acknowledgement, while others, equally respectful, were clearly curious, their gazes lingering on my uniform. The elevator carried me silently to the executive floor, the very heart of Pinnacle, where the day's critical meetings would take place. As the doors opened with a soft hiss, I came face to face with my brother, Gregory, who was intensely reviewing notes on a tablet, completely oblivious to his surroundings. His eyes flicked up casually, then widened in a sudden, almost comical shock as he registered both my unexpected presence and, more critically, my full dress uniform. "Natalie, what are you doing here? And why are you wearing that?" Confusion, rapidly giving way to the beginning traces of alarm, crossed his face as his gaze fixed on the conal insignia on my collar. "Good morning, Gregory," I replied professionally, my voice calm and even, devoid of any personal emotion. "I am here for the project review." Before he could respond, before he could even process the implications of my statement, my father turned the corner, deeply engaged in conversation with two other high-ranking executives. He stopped mid-sentence when he saw me, his expression shifting from initial surprise to bewilderment, then to a rapidly escalating concern. "Natalie, what is going on? Why are you in uniform?" He glanced around nervously, his eyes darting from me to his colleagues, clearly worried about what they might think, about the perception of this unexpected intrusion. "Dad," I acknowledged with a simple nod, my demeanor unwavering. I was just about to head into the conference room to prepare. "The meeting starts in 20 minutes. Correct." The executives accompanying my father were now staring intently at my rank insignia, their faces showing a growing recognition, a dawning understanding. One of them, a sharply dressed woman named Barbara Jenkins from Legal, according to her name badge, stepped forward, her expression morphing into one of deference. "Colonel," she said, her voice filled with respect, "it is an honor to have you here. We were not aware you would be attending in person today." My father's face paled, the color draining from his cheeks. "Colonel? Natalie, what is this about?" His voice was a strained whisper. I maintained my professional demeanor, acutely aware of the growing audience in the hallway, the hushed whispers now turning into overt stares. "I believe CEO Murphy will explain everything during the meeting," I stated, my tone firm but polite. "If you will excuse me." And with that, I walked toward the conference room, leaving them stunned in my wake. As I walked away, I could hear the whispered conversations erupting behind me, a mixture of disbelief and curiosity. Years of rigorous military training had taught me to maintain composure under immense pressure, to project calm in the face of chaos. But I could not deny the small, almost mischievous satisfaction I felt at their profound shock, a quiet victory already unfolding. The conference room was already bustling with staff, setting up presentation materials and arranging refreshments for the high-level meeting. The young woman carefully arranging water pitchers nearly dropped one when she saw me enter, her eyes widening in surprise. "Oh, Colonel," she stammered, recovering quickly. "We weren't told you would be here in person. Do you need anything special set up?" "Everything looks fine, thank you," I replied, taking a seat at the position clearly reserved for the military liaison, a spot strategically placed at the head of the table, adjacent to the CEO's chair. Over the next 15 minutes, various executives and team leaders filtered into the room. Many introduced themselves to me with a palpable deference, a stark contrast to how my family had treated me just the previous evening. Several mentioned being surprised to meet me in person, as they had expected a video conference, a remote presence. My father and brother entered the room together, both looking noticeably unsettled, their usual corporate swagger completely absent. They took seats far from me, occasionally shooting confused, anxious glances in my direction. I focused on reviewing my notes, not giving them the satisfaction of an explanation, not offering any pre-emptive answers before the meeting officially began. At precisely 9 a.m., the door opened and CEO Shannon Murphy entered, flanked by her executive team, a formidable presence in her impeccably tailored suit. Shannon was renowned for her direct approach, her strategic brilliance, and her unwavering focus. She had, through sheer force of will and intellect, led Pinnacle to become one of the top defense contractors in the nation. The room fell silent as she scanned the attendees, her sharp, intelligent gaze stopping abruptly when it reached me. A warm smile of recognition spread across her face as she changed direction, bypassing the other executives and heading straight for my position at the table. "Colonel Williams," she said warmly, extending her hand, her grip firm and confident. "What an unexpected pleasure to have you here in person. I thought we were scheduled for a video conference today." I stood and shook her hand firmly, returning her warmth. "I was in town visiting family, and thought this would be a good opportunity to review the project in person." "General." Shannon nodded appreciatively. "Excellent initiative. Your presence will certainly make today's discussions more productive, more impactful." She then turned to address the entire room, her voice carrying an undeniable authority. "For those who may not be aware, Colonel Williams is our Pentagon liaison for Project Aegis. She will be overseeing the implementation of the new security protocols and as final approval authority for all technical specifications and strategic decisions." I could see my father's jaw literally drop from across the room, his eyes wide with shock and disbelief. Gregory was staring at me as if seeing a complete stranger, his face a mask of utter confusion. "Good morning, Colonel," Shannon continued, turning back to me with a respectful nod. "I look forward to your insights today." The meeting began with project updates from various team leaders. Each presenter meticulously addressed their comments to both Shannon and me, clearly acknowledging my authority over the military aspects of the critical project. When complex technical questions arose about integration with existing defense systems, all eyes turned to me for answers. Recognizing my specialized expertise, I provided detailed analysis and clear, concise directives, drawing on my years of specialized experience in cybersecurity and defense systems. With each comment I made, with each question I answered, I could see my father and brother exchanging increasingly incredulous looks, their carefully constructed worldview visibly crumbling before their eyes. When it came time for Gregory to present his portion, his normally confident voice wavered, a slight tremor in his tone. "As the team lead for user interface integration, I have developed a streamlined approach too," he faltered, his eyes darting to mine, as if seeking permission or understanding. "Please continue, Mr. Williams," I encouraged professionally, my voice calm and neutral, as if he were any other presenter, and not my brother who had laughed at my career choice. Just 12 hours earlier, Gregory stumbled through his presentation, clearly thrown by my unexpected presence and, more profoundly, by my position of authority. When he finished, I asked several pointed, technical questions that meticulously exposed gaps in his planning, not out of malice or a desire to embarrass him, but because the project demanded thorough scrutiny, because national security was at stake. These are important considerations that need to be addressed before we can approve this phase. I concluded, my voice firm. Please submit revised specifications by the end of the week. My father watched this exchange with a stunned, almost horrified expression. Witnessing his son, his golden boy, being held accountable, being gently but firmly challenged by his daughter, the daughter he had dismissed for years, as wasting her potential. As the meeting progressed, it became increasingly clear to everyone in the room that I possessed an expertise and an authority that commanded instant, genuine respect. My family was seeing for the very first time what my colleagues and superiors in the military had recognized and nurtured years ago. By the time Shannon closed the meeting 3 hours later, the power dynamics in the room had been irrevocably altered. Colonel Williams will remain on site through tomorrow to conduct security assessments, she announced, her gaze sweeping over the room. I expect everyone to provide her with whatever information and access she requires. This project is critical to national security and to Pinnacle's future. As the room slowly cleared, Shannon approached me again, her smile warm. Colonel, I must say your reputation is well deserved. General Grant speaks highly of you. but seeing you in action today confirms everything I have heard. Your insights are invaluable. From the corner of my eye, I could see my father hovering nearby, clearly eager to speak with me, but visibly uncertain how to approach, how to bridge the chasm that had opened between us. The moment of revelation had arrived, and there would be no going back to the comfortable, dismissive ignorance of the past. The conference room slowly emptied, leaving only my family and a few senior executives, who were engaged in conversation with Shannon Murphy. My father hovered awkwardly at the edge of the group, his posture stiff, visibly struggling to process the seismic shift in his understanding of me, of our relationship, of his entire world. Gregory stood beside him, his earlier corporate confidence completely evaporated, replaced by a mixture of confusion and a dawning, uncomfortable realization. Shannon, unaware of the profound family drama unfolding before her, gestured me over to join her small circle. "Colonel Williams," she said warmly, "let me introduce you properly to our senior team. Some of them you may already know from project documentation, but it is always better to connect in person, to put a face to the name." I nodded professionally and joined her, my presence creating a subtle ripple in the group. She placed a hand lightly on my shoulder, a gesture of collegial respect that would have been utterly unthinkable between a CEO and a junior team member. "Everyone, this is Colonel Natalie Williams, the Pentagon's primary liaison for Project Aegis. Colonel Williams has been instrumental in developing the security frameworks that will form the very backbone of our system, ensuring its resilience against the most sophisticated threats." The Senior Vice President of Engineering, a distinguished man named Thomas Bailey, extended his hand, his eyes alight with genuine admiration. "Colonel, your reputation precedes you. Your paper on adaptive countermeasures against quantum computing threats was revolutionary. We have implemented several of your recommendations already. Thank you, Mr. Bailey," I replied, accepting his handshake. I appreciate the practical application of theoretical work. I was acutely aware of my father and brother, watching this entire exchange, with a mixture of disbelief and utter stupefaction. Shannon continued the introductions, moving around the circle until she reached my father. "And of course, you must know Albert Williams, our esteemed Director of Regional Operations. Albert has been with Pinnacle for nearly 3 decades, a true cornerstone of our company." An awkward silence descended upon the group as everyone registered our shared last name. Shannon looked between us, a slow realization dawning on her face. "Williams, are you related?" Before I could answer diplomatically, to try and mitigate the awkwardness, my father stepped forward, almost involuntarily. "She is my daughter," he said, his voice a complex, almost incomprehensible mixture of confusion, pride, and a new emotion I had never, ever heard from him before. "Was it respect, your daughter?" Shannon looked genuinely, profoundly surprised, her eyes widening slightly. "Albert, you never mentioned your daughter was Colonel Williams." Colonel Williams, who has been overseeing our biggest military contract. The one whose work we've been praising for months. My father struggled visibly to find words, his mouth opening and closing uselessly. I did not. I was not aware of Natalie's current position. Shannon turned to me with a questioning look, a silent inquiry. I maintained my professional demeanor, despite the deeply personal undercurrents swirling in the room. My family, and I have not had much opportunity to discuss my career progression. I explained simply, a polite understatement that conveyed volumes. Gregory, unable to contain himself any longer, stepped forward, his face etched with disbelief. "You cannot be serious. You're the colonel everyone has been talking about. The one with final approval on the entire project. The one that Shannon just said was so important." "Yes," I confirmed, my voice steady. "I have been overseeing Project Aegis for the past 6 months, since my promotion to full colonel." 6 months, my father repeated, his voice hollow, as if the air had been sucked from his lungs. "You have been a colonel for 6 months and never told us." Shannon looked increasingly uncomfortable as she realized she had stumbled directly into a deeply personal family tension. "Well, this is certainly unexpected," she said, quickly regaining her composure. "Colonel Williams, perhaps you would like to explain your role directly to the team. Since you are here in person, we should take full advantage of your expertise." I nodded gratefully for the professional redirect, a lifeline in the suddenly charged atmosphere. "Of course." Project Aegis represents a $1.2 billion investment in next-generation cybersecurity infrastructure. As the military liaison, my role is to ensure that all developments meet Pentagon specifications and security requirements, that every aspect aligns with our national defense strategy. I moved to the front of the room and activated the presentation screen, displaying a comprehensive project overview. As I spoke, I could see the expressions on the executives' faces shift from initial curiosity to genuine respect, their nods becoming more frequent and emphatic. My detailed knowledge of both the intricate technical aspects and the broader strategic implications of the project demonstrated exactly why I held my position, why I was indispensable. All major design decisions, budget allocations, and implementation strategies require my approval before proceeding. I continued, the words landing heavily, undeniably, in the now silent room. This includes staffing decisions for key positions within the project. My brother paled at this last point, undoubtedly remembering his boast about leading a new team on this very project, just last night. Shannon nodded approvingly as I finished my overview. "As you can all see, we are fortunate beyond measure to have Colonel Williams guiding this project. Her expertise is unmatched, and her authority in this matter is absolute." The executives nodded in agreement, several making hurried notes. My father sat rigid in his chair, his expression unreadable, a complex tapestry of shock, confusion, and dawning realization. "In fact," Shannon continued, her gaze sweeping over the room, "Colonel Williams will be conducting performance evaluations of all team leads over the next 2 days to assess our progress and resource allocation for the project." Gregory's face went from pale to ashen. Just last night, he had laughed about my career amounting to nothing, dismissing me as a mere paper pusher. And now his stuck little sister, would be evaluating his performance, holding him accountable for the very project he had boasted about. As the meeting concluded, Shannon pulled me aside. "Colonel, I had no idea Albert was your father. This must be quite a proud moment for your family." I offered a diplomatic smile. "It is certainly a significant moment." "Well, they should be extremely proud," she stated firmly. "Your work has been exceptional. I have told Albert many times how fortunate we are to have such a strong military partner on this project. Someone of your caliber leading the charge." And my father overheard this exchange as he approached, his expression now a mixture of profound confusion and what appeared to be dawning regret, a deep understanding beginning to surface. "Natalie," he began, struggling with how to address me in this new context, his voice uncharacteristically tentative.
"We need to talk."
"Of course," I replied professionally, respecting his discomfort, but asserting my own schedule. "I have a brief meeting with the security team, then I can meet you in your office at 1100. 11 a.m.? He nodded mutely, unaccustomed to taking scheduling directions from me. As the executives filed out, I could hear them murmuring about the unexpected revelation. "Did you know Albert's daughter was Colonel Williams? No wonder she rose so quickly with connections like that." "Actually," another voice cut in, clear and distinct, "I heard she refused any family connections. Did it all on merit. Thomas Bailey vouched for her, said she's brilliant." The last comment, from Thomas Bailey, carried clearly across the emptying room, causing my father to stop in his tracks, his shoulders slumping slightly. The implication was clear. I had achieved my position, Not because of my family connections or their support, but despite their lack of it, despite their persistent skepticism. The truth was finally coming to light, and with it, the opportunity for a long overdue understanding. At precisely 11 a.m., I knocked on the door of my father's office. Through the glass partition, I could see not just my father, but my mother and brother as well. Someone, undoubtedly Gregory in a panic, must have called my mother to come to the office after the morning's shattering revelations. "Enter," my father called, his voice lacking its usual authoritative, booming tone. I stepped inside, still in full uniform, and closed the door behind me, sealing us in this crucible of confrontation. My mother, Diana, sat perched on the very edge of a chair, her expression fluctuating wildly between profound confusion and something that looked almost like fear, a raw vulnerability I had rarely seen. Gregory stood by the window, his arms crossed defensively across his chest, a fortress against the truth. "Please sit down," my father offered, gesturing to the chair across from his desk, a tentative invitation. "Thank you, but I prefer to stand," I replied, automatically adopting the at-ease position, hands clasped behind my back. An uncomfortable, heavy silence filled the room, stretching tautly, until my father finally spoke, his voice strained. "Why didn't you tell us?" "All this time we thought—" "You thought what, Dad?" I asked calmly, my voice level devoid of accusation, simply stating the facts. That I was wasting my potential. That I would never amount to anything in the military. That I was hiding from real competition, from the real world. I quoted their various dismissals, their casual cruelties over the years, without raising my voice, each phrase a quiet echo of their past judgment. "We didn't know." My mother interjected quickly, a defensive note in her voice. "How could we know if you never told us? I sent you invitations to every promotion ceremony." I replied, my gaze steady on hers. "I called after each new assignment, each new posting, describing the work I was doing. I even emailed articles when my work was declassified enough to be recognized publicly, hoping you would read them." "But a colonel," my father said, still struggling with the sheer concept, with the magnitude of the rank. "That is a very high rank." "Yes," I confirmed. "It is. It is equivalent to a corporate vice president, approximately." This comparison landed exactly as I expected, causing both my father and brother to sit up straighter, their eyes widening at the tangible corporate equivalent of my military success. "And you have authority over our contract?" Gregory asked, his tone accusatory, a desperate attempt to regain control. "Is that why you came home now? To ambush us and embarrass me in front of Shannon?" "I came home because it has been 5 years, and despite everything, you are my family," I replied evenly, my voice unwavering. The timing with the contract review was coincidental, though admittedly convenient. "Convenient," my father repeated bitterly, his jaw tightening. "You show up at my workplace in full uniform, without warning. Do you have any idea how this looks? People will think I used nepotism to get my daughter assigned to our project, that I pulled strings." I had to laugh, a short, sharp burst of incredulous amusement. "Dad, I have spent my entire career actively avoiding any connection to your company, precisely to prevent that perception, to stand on my own 2 feet. General Grant assigned me to this project because of my expertise in adaptive cybersecurity systems and my proven record with similar, high-stakes implementations. She knows what I'm capable of, General Grant," my mother asked, confused. "My mentor and commanding officer," I explained, turning my gaze to her. "She has been what you could have been all these years. Supportive, challenging when necessary, and genuinely proud of my accomplishments, no matter how unconventional they seemed." The words hit home, and I saw my mother flinch, a fleeting wince of recognition. "So this was all about showing us up?" Gregory demanded again, his voice rising. "A desperate attempt to shift the blame, making us look foolish for not believing in your military career." "No," I said firmly, my voice cutting through his anger. This was about doing my job, the job I have trained for, sacrificed for, and excelled at. The fact that you never took it seriously is not my responsibility. That is yours to bear. My father stood up, anger finally breaking through his shock, a familiar, intimidating presence. You could have warned us. You deliberately let us go on believing you were still some junior officer pushing paper somewhere. Would it have mattered? I asked quietly, the question hanging heavy in the air between us, undeniable in its truth. When have any of you ever shown genuine interest in my career? Last night at dinner, not one of you asked me a single substantial question about my work or my life. It was all about Gregory's promotion and Tiffany's condo. That was all you cared about. The undeniable truth of this statement hung in the air between us, a stark, uncomfortable silence. We always wanted what was best for you. My mother said weakly, her voice thin. No. I corrected her gently but firmly. You wanted what you thought was best for me. You wanted me to follow the path you understood and valued, the one that fit your predetermined notions of success. When I chose differently, you decided my choice was invalid, rather than considering that I might know what was right for my own life, that my path had its own unique value. My father sank back into his chair, the anger draining out of him, replaced by a profound wariness. Your brother followed the plan. He is doing well. I am happy for Gregory, I said sincerely, my gaze softening slightly as I looked at my brother. But that was never going to be my path. I needed something different, something that challenged me in a way I couldn't find here. Gregory uncrossed his arms, his defensive posture softening slightly, a rare moment of vulnerability from him. All these years, we thought you were just stuck, going nowhere. We thought you were just coasting. I know what you thought, I replied, a touch of lingering bitterness in my voice. You made it abundantly clear every time we spoke. You will never be anything in the military. Those were your exact words last night. Greg. He had the decency to look deeply ashamed, his eyes dropping to the floor. I didn't know, he mumbled. You never asked. I pointed out, my voice quiet now. None of you did. My mother stood up suddenly, her expression shifting, almost performative. Well, now we know. And of course, we are very proud indeed. I always told your father that the military was a respectable career. The revisionist history was so typical, so utterly predictable, that I almost smiled, a wry twist of my lips. Mom, please don't do that, I said gently, but with a firmness that surprised her. Don't pretend you've been supportive all along. It diminishes any chance of honest reconciliation, any real progress. Her mouth opened and closed, unaccustomed to being directly contradicted, to having her narrative challenged so bluntly. Natalie, my father said, using my given name instead of my rank for the first time since the morning's meeting, his voice rough with emotion. What do you want from us now? An apology. Public recognition. What do we do? What I have always wanted, I replied simply, my gaze unwavering. Respect for my choices. Acknowledgement that my path, while different from what you planned, has value and meaning. That is all I have ever asked for. The room fell silent again as they absorbed my words, truly listened to them for the first time. Finally, my father stood and approached me. For a moment, I thought he might try to hug me, an impulse foreign to our relationship, but he stopped and extended his hand formally instead, a characteristic gesture. Colonel Williams, he said, his voice thick with emotion, surprisingly raw, I owe you an apology, a significant one. I failed to recognize your achievements and dismissed your career out of ignorance and prejudice. I was wrong, deeply wrong. The formality of his approach was so characteristic of him, yet the admission, the unvarnished confession of error, was entirely new, a monumental step. I accepted his handshake, my grip firm. Thank you, Dad. I still don't understand everything about what you do, he continued, his eyes meeting mine. But I would like to learn. If you are willing to teach me. It was more than I had expected. A gesture of humility and genuine interest that cracked open something tight inside my chest, allowing a fragile hope to bloom. I would like that very much. My mother approached next, less comfortable with direct, explicit apologies. We should have come to your ceremonies, she said instead, her voice softer than usual. I would have liked to see you recognized. It was as close to an apology as she could manage at the moment, a tentative olive branch, and I accepted it with a nod. Gregory remained by the window, still struggling internally, grappling with the profound shift in his understanding of me, of himself. Finally, he spoke, a hint of his old competitive spirit in his voice, but tinged with a new, grudging respect. So, you outrank me by a lot. This is not a competition, Greg, I said gently, a small smile touching my lips. It always has been, though, he replied with surprising insight, looking up. Mom and Dad set us up that way from the beginning. I just had the advantage of following the path they already approved of. It was the most honest thing my brother had said to me in years, a moment of profound, painful clarity. We chose different paths, I reiterated. Both have value. Both require dedication. He nodded slowly, still processing. For what it's worth, what I saw in that meeting today, I could never do what you do. The technical knowledge alone, not to mention the leadership presence, it was impressive. Really impressive. Coming from Gregory, this was equivalent to a full prostration and a heartfelt apology. I felt the last of my defensive walls begin to lower, replaced by a sense of calm acceptance. Thank you. My father cleared his throat, breaking the silence. Shannon wants to have dinner tonight, with all of us, now that she knows we are family. She's quite impressed with you, Natalie. I know, I said simply, allowing myself a small, genuinely pleased smile. Of course you know, my father replied, shaking his head with what looked like newfound respect, a wry amusement dancing in his eyes. You probably know more about this company's classified operations than I do at this point. Only the classified parts, I said, and was rewarded with a genuine laugh from him. Perhaps the first we had shared in years. The palpable tension in the room had transformed into something different, something tentative, fragile, but undeniably hopeful. There was still damage to repair, years of dismissal and hurt to work through, a long road ahead. But for the first time, I felt that my family was seeing me, truly seeing me. Not just the daughter they had wanted, but the woman I had become. I have another meeting to get to, I said, glancing at my watch, a gentle reminder of my professional obligations. But I would be happy to join you all for dinner with Shannon tonight. As I turned to leave, my mother called out, Natalie, we. She struggled, searching for the words, for an adequate expression of her newly discovered feelings. I know, Mom, I said gently, offering her a soft, understanding smile. One step at a time. I closed the door behind me, leaving my family to process the new, bewildering reality. Their daughter, their sister, was nothing, after all. She was Colonel Natalie Williams, and she had earned every inch of the respect and authority she now commanded. 6 months later, I hosted my family for dinner at my Washington, D.C. apartment. The spacious 2-bedroom condo, with its sweeping views of the Potomac River, was a far cry from my childhood home in Montana, a stark symbol of the life I had built for myself. It had become my sanctuary over the past few years, a place where I could truly be myself. The changes in our family dynamic were still evolving, still a work in progress, but the progress was undeniable, palpable. My father, Albert, arrived first, carrying a framed news article. It detailed the successful implementation of Project Aegis and highlighted my pivotal role in it, featuring a striking photo of me in uniform alongside General Eleanor and Shannon Murphy at the project launch event. I thought you might want a copy for your wall as well, he said, somewhat shyly, his voice holding a hint of pride that was still new and unfamiliar between us. He had had it professionally mounted and had been proudly displaying it in his own office. "Thank you, Dad. That is thoughtful," I replied, genuinely touched by the gesture. 6 months ago, he would have considered such military recognition utterly irrelevant, a triviality compared to corporate accolades. My mother Diana arrived with a homemade apple pie, my childhood favorite. Her attempts at connecting were still a little awkward, sometimes clumsy, but they were undeniably sincere. She had completely stopped making comparisons between me and Gregory or Tiffany, a silent acknowledgement of my own unique path. Instead, she asked genuine questions about my work, at least the unclassified parts, showing a nascent curiosity. "Your apartment is lovely, Natalie," she commented, looking around at the minimalist but elegant decor, her eyes taking in every detail. "So neat and organized. Military precision," I joked, and she actually laughed, a real unforced laugh, instead of using it as an opportunity to criticize my career choice, to point out its perceived limitations. Gregory and Megan arrived last, bringing an expensive bottle of wine. The most surprising transformation had been in my brother. After the initial shock of the revelation wore off, he had approached me with genuine curiosity about my work and my career path, seeking my advice, my insights. "So," he began, as we sat in the living room before dinner, a comfortable camaraderie now developing between us. "I implemented those security protocols you suggested last month. The team thought I was a genius for coming up with them." I raised an eyebrow, a playful challenge in my gaze. "Did you give credit where it was due?" He grinned sheepishly. "Eventually, after enjoying the praise for about 5 minutes. But seriously, the implementation has been smooth. The client is impressed. It really worked." "Good work," I said sincerely, a professional acknowledgement that resonated deeply with him. "Your team executes well." This simple professional acknowledgement meant more to him now than any familial platitude ever had. He had started seeing me as a colleague worthy of respect, not just his little sister, not just a rival. My father, who had been examining the military awards, displayed modestly on my bookshelf ribbons. Medals, service commendations turned to me, a thoughtful expression on his face. "I read that article about the cyber attack you helped prevent last year. I didn't understand all the technical details, but it sounded significant. Truly important work." "It was," I confirmed. "We caught it early, which was fortunate. A minute later and the damage could have been catastrophic. Lives were at stake." He asked, beginning to grasp the deeper importance of my work, the gravity of it. "Potentially, yes," I replied, meeting his gaze. "Infrastructure security affects everyone, not just soldiers on a battlefield. It's the hospitals, the power grids, the banking systems. All vulnerable." He nodded thoughtfully, a new understanding dawning in his eyes. "I always thought military service was about physical combat, about tanks and guns. I never considered the cyber battlefield. Most people don't." I acknowledged, a hint of a smile. "That's partly why we can be so effective. Enemies don't always see us coming." The doorbell rang, pulling me from our conversation, and I excused myself to answer it. General Eleanor Grant stood in the hallway, her uniform as impeccable as always despite her off-duty status, a beacon of strength and grace. "Colonel Williams." She greeted me with a warm smile, her eyes twinkling. "General." I returned the greeting, stepping aside to let her in. "Thank you for joining us tonight." I had invited Eleanor to dinner partly because she was in town for meetings, but also because I desperately wanted my family to meet the woman who had believed in me, who had seen my potential when they had not. "Everyone," I announced as we returned to the living room. "This is Brigadier General Eleanor Grant, my commanding officer and mentor. A leaner. This is my family." My father stood immediately, extending his hand with the same profound respect he would show any high-ranking corporate executive perhaps even more. General Grant, it is an honor. I understand we have you to thank for recognizing Natalie's potential, for giving her these opportunities. Eleanor shook his hand firmly, her smile warm. The potential was always there, Mr. Williams. I simply provided the opportunities for it to flourish, to truly come into its own. My mother bustled forward, regaining some of her familiar domestic energy. General, please make yourself comfortable. Dinner is almost ready. As we moved to the dining table, the conversation flowed more naturally than any family gathering I could remember. Eleanor shared anecdotes about military life, stories that helped my parents understand the complex, challenging world I inhabited, while carefully avoiding any classified details. Natalie designed a simulation program that is now standard training for all cybersecurity personnel across the command. She told them over the main course, her voice filled with pride. Her innovative approach reduced successful breach attempts in training scenarios by 63%. I watched my parents absorb this information, saw them truly hearing about my accomplishments, perhaps for the very first time, not filtered through their own expectations. We didn't know. My mother said quietly, her voice tinged with a new sadness, a dawning regret. All these years, we didn't know what you were really doing. You never asked, I replied, but this time. The words were uttered without the bitterness that would have colored them 6 months ago. But now you know, and that is what matters. That is progress. After dinner, Gregory helped me clear the dishes while our parents continued talking with Eleanor, their conversation animated, engaged. You know, he said quietly, as he stacked plates, I spent years thinking I was ahead of you in the game of life, getting promotions, climbing the corporate ladder, making connections. But you were playing an entirely different game, at a much higher level, with much higher stakes. It was never a competition, Greg. I reminded him gently. I know that now, he acknowledged, his voice sincere. And I am sorry for making it one. For all of it. These quiet moments of genuine connection, of shared vulnerability, would have seemed utterly impossible during that painful family dinner 6 months ago. The healing was not complete, perhaps would never be fully complete, but it was real progress, a foundation being slowly, carefully rebuilt. Later, as we enjoyed coffee and my mother's apple pie, a fragile new tradition forming, my father raised his glass in a toast. To Colonel Natalie Williams, he said, his voice carrying an unmistakable note of pride, a depth of emotion that brought tears to my eyes. Who proved that following your own path, however unconventional, can lead to extraordinary places. We may have been slow to see it, but we could not be prouder now. To Natalie, I raised my glass along with the others, feeling a profound sense of peace. A quiet contentment I had not experienced in my childhood home for many, many years. The validation I had once desperately sought from my family no longer defined me, no longer dictated my worth. But their recognition, their acceptance was still healing, a soothing balm on old wounds. In the end, it was never truly about proving them wrong. It was about becoming who I was meant to be, embracing my true self, whether they approved or not. That they had finally come to respect my choices was not the victory. The victory had been in making those choices for myself, all along. So, what about you? Have you ever had your achievements dismissed? Your choices belittled by people who should have supported you? How did you handle it? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, if it stirred something within you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories of resilience, triumph, and the quiet power of self-belief. Remember to share with anyone who needs to be reminded that sometimes the best validation comes not from external approval, but from proving yourself on your own terms. Thank you for listening. And remember, your path is valid, truly valid, even when others fail to see its immense value.